Hi, and welcome to the main attraction. Today we're going to start putting a backdrop up behind the Glenwood Canyon, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Mike with the main attraction, where our focus is what is on our tracks, namely our trains. We're here to learn as much as we can about model railroading and have fun in the process. If you're new here, go ahead and click the little subscribe button and then the little bell icon right next to it, and you'll get notified every time we put up a new video. This week I started installing the backdrop on my layout. I'm really excited for this phase. I'm happy with how my bench work turned out, but let's face it, if all I have is bench work, it's really not much to look at. And the whole point of having the bench work is to have a base to run my trains on. I know I can't run my trains on a backdrop either, but I really need to do this now as opposed to later. I'll explain more about that in a minute. So now let's move over to the bench work and get started. Here you can see why I decided to attach the backdrop at this time. I got this end of the layout all ready to lay track. There's a turnback loop here, so it's a little wider than most of the rest of the layout. If I try to reach back to where my backdrop will go, I can't reach it, so I would never be able to attach my backdrop to my bench work. Even if I use a stepladder, I still can't reach back that far. So I need to put my backdrop on before I attach my tabletop. My next decision is how tall to make the backdrop. So I made a little mock-up here to help me visualize. On the right is a 2-foot tall piece of backdrop. I decided to use 1/8 inch pressed hardboard, sometimes called masonite. Masonite is actually a brand name, but a lot of people still refer to this type of board by that name. I can get this in 2x4 foot pieces and 4x4 foot pieces at my local Menards. This section of my layout is going to be the city of Glenwood, Colorado. Even though it's in the mountains, this part of the layout will be fairly flat, especially compared to what is over to the left. To your left a little ways will be Glenwood Canyon. Glenwood Canyon is a beautiful spot, about 12 miles long, with canyon walls up to 1,300 feet high. For my N-scale layout, that would equate to 8-foot canyon walls. So if I wanted my train to run on the floor of my layout room, I could have floor to ceiling canyon walls. Even though I love scenery, I think that's a bit excessive. Up here I've put a 4-foot piece of hardboard, and it goes all the way to the ceiling. Down here I have another mock-up that I made of how high the canyon floor will be at the other end of the canyon. And as you can tell, that will give me about 2.5 foot of canyon wall and about 6 inches to a foot of sky above that. I really think that's more canyon wall than I need to have up here. If I use a 2-foot backdrop, I don't think I get to see enough of the canyon walls. This looks like little more than a hill to me. It's not very dramatic, especially when I get to the other end of the canyon. In the middle here is a 3-foot section of backdrop. That will give me about 1.5 to 2 feet of canyon wall, which is still a pretty good amount even at the other end of the canyon. I like that the best, so that's what we're going to do. Now let's get to work on it. The first thing I did is cut all the hardboard to 3-foot heights. This was pretty simple, but it makes a lot of dust. I'd recommend a dust mask while cutting this stuff, as I sure wouldn't want to be breathing this stuff in, especially if you're cutting it indoors. Notice on this shot how much dust is getting thrown from this panel. Also be sure to keep your shop vac handy. You'll be using that plenty. I cut the last few of these outside, as you can see, but it's been raining, so I cut most of them right here in the train room. I hope the dust didn't get into the mechanisms on my locomotives that were up here on my mock-up. That wouldn't make me very happy. The backdrop is going to be resting on the joists of my benchwork. You can see in this shot that some of the joists don't go all the way to the wall, so I need to extend them. I just cut some 1x4s to about 6 inches long. The backdrop is going to be held in place by 1x2s, so I cut them to length. about 3 feet for the backdrop plus another 3.5 inches for the joists. Then I glued and screwed the 1x2s to the joist extensions. In some places that need to support the backdrop there are no joists, so instead of an extension, I'll just put a whole new joist in there. The next part is attaching the joist extensions to the existing joists. I want the backdrop as close to the wall as I can get it, and I use a level to keep the 1x2s as close to straight vertical as I could. Next, the backdrop goes up and gets screwed into the 1x2s. The only tricky part of that is to find the 1x2s. I marked a line where the 1x2s are hiding behind the hardboard to help me find them. I use 3/4 inch screws. Since the backdrop's weight is resting on the joist, these screws only need to keep the backdrop from falling forward onto the layout. I drilled countersink holes for the screw heads. I can fill them in with spackling compound when it's time to paint, and then there won't be any bumps in the backdrop. Be careful when countersinking. This hardboard is only an 1/8 inch thick, and you don't want to go all the way through it. Maybe the trickiest part of this whole project is putting a piece of this hardboard in the corner. After rigging this platform of joists and uprights, I had to bend the hardboard to go around the corner. There's a little flex in the hardboard, but not much. I took one of these pieces out on the deck and used the hose to soak it as best I could. The hardboard has a coating on it, so it's pretty tough to get the water into the wood. I probably spent a little while trying that. Then I took it into my walk-in shower so I could use hot water. I don't know if that was more effective or not, but one website I looked at said to use hot water. I could have possibly used a wire brush to rough it up a little, and that might have broken the finish some, so the board could have soaked up the water better. After doing my best to wet it, I wrapped it around a couple of 5-gallon buckets and clamped it. It seemed that the middle part wanted to bulge out a little, so I weighted down one side and used a bungee to hold the center of the other side, to keep it more in line with the ends. I left it for a couple days until I was ready for it. I would at least leave it to dry overnight at a minimum. Here's the finished product ready to install, and here it is up on the layout. I wanted to check out a paint sample for the sky. What do you think of this color? Let me know down in the comments. I used this technique on some other corners up ahead. They're not 90 degrees, they're actually more like 45 degrees. Some turn in and some turn out. But getting them to the right curvature at the right place in the backdrop board has been a bigger challenge than I expected. When I get to the fascia on the front, there'll be several places where I need to bend those as well. Now the backdrop is up, as you can see, and I can start putting the tabletop on and start laying track. I might wait on painting the backdrop until later, I'm not sure. I should be able to do that a lot easier than I could put the backdrop up. Doesn't this backdrop look great? I'm real happy how it turned out. If you're new to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and then hit the little bell icon right next to that so you get notified every time I put up a new video. Have you put up a backdrop on your layout? Let me know in the comments down there how you did yours. And if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Next time, we're going to start putting some tabletop on, laying some sub-road bed, and even putting some track down. I can hardly wait. So until next time, I'm Mike. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time on the main attraction.